as a theater artist, I also think a lot about healing our communities, especially because a lot of the theater I've been doing in the last decade or two has been about theater for change. Hi, I'm Sarah Donnell. I'm a theater artist and an interfaith chaplain. My expression of art in the world is manyfold. The easy answer is that as a theater artist, that is my first love. I'm also a writer, but those things go together for me. I love writing poetry, and I think just even life feels like an artistic pursuit for me. I love the creativity of every moment, but primarily I orient myself as a theater artist, and a lot of my writing flows into theater or comes out of theater. And I'm specifically interested in performer-created theater. So it's a little funny for a writer maybe to orient myself that way, because a lot of times I do sit alone and write scripts to take to other people to act out. But I really love experiences where a group of people come together and get to explore the ideas that we can only have together. The collective unconscious can get unleashed, and we're thinking on our feet, and we're proposing and meeting each other's invitations and creating material that we never could have planned. And that influences so much of how I think about life as a creative pursuit too, because I think there's a lot of that in the everyday if we allow it, that moment to moment influence of being human and meeting the invitations of our natural, beautiful world, and then creating human experience and emotional meaning together. So I began writing, I remember writing my first poem before I knew how to write all of my letters very well. So I created a poem in my head, and then I had a really patient babysitter who I'm sure I drove her a little nuts, asking her, how do you make an R again? How do you, because I had this poem in my head and I really wanted to put it on paper. So I don't know how old I was when I was doing that, maybe 3 or 4, making little stories and books, and certainly acting out things with other children. Is one of my first expressions of writing and theater, storytelling. But I would say I began consciously doing it probably when I was about 10 years old. I didn't know that I wanted to be in theater. It was kind of an age where I'm trying a lot of things. And I think maybe my parents could identify that I was a highly sensitive child with really big feelings who needed an outlet for those feelings and all of that energy. And I was really lucky to live in a community that happened to have this beautiful children's theater that was supported by parents, but was really driven by kids and for kids. And I went to one audition and I didn't get a part, and I thought maybe this isn't for me. And then my parents took me back maybe a year later, and I got in, and it was just like this huge light bulb. Like suddenly all the things that made me strange and awkward in other social situations were useful and celebrated and met with other people who were doing their own versions of showing up in this way and making something together. And I was just hooked from then on. I loved it so much. And then, there's a long story of kind of how I have found my way into the nooks and crannies of the theater world and the theater practice that I didn't even know existed when I was beginning, but that was how it started for me. It started in community, and maybe that's why that's such a big part of my orientation to it now is about the experience of myself and myself with other people. I think art and theater in particular impact my life in so many ways. For a long time, it was the way I knew how to make friends. I didn't know how to make friends if I wasn't in a play with people. It's how I've made a living in various applied venues for that, not just in the theater building, but bringing theater into the world, into, you know, the boardroom or into the community meeting. So it impacts my life and others' lives in that way. But I think it more than anything, it impacts the way I see the world as kind of this beautiful play that we get to participate in, and ways that we can step in or lean in as participants, as active, artful participants, and also step out and reflect as witness and understand that there are layers of reality to everything. It really helps me orient myself in conflict or in discovery or in just the unfolding unknown moment to moment of being a human. I have shared theater with the world first as an actor, and as I really, when I was young, I wanted to do a little bit of everything, and it made me learn such a well-rounded amount of skills, you know, being a stage manager, being a director, being an actor, being a writer, being somebody who makes the props or the costumes, and I love meeting the world in that way. And then as I've been devoted to this art and this craft and this kind of worldview with theater, I've found my way into applied theater, which again brings theater out of the box of the theater building and into where we meet each other in our everyday lives. 2012, I thought I was taking a break from theater when I went to New York and I was working as an actor, and I had a big period of burnout, and I decided to stop pursuing theater. I thought I was going to leave, and so I came home and I started teaching, and I was teaching adult literacy, and that teaching position ended up leading me back into theater and using theater as a tool. And this was just such an awakening for me. I say that this is where I stopped pursuing theater and it started pursuing me. And I found myself really led on this path in a new way than I had been approaching it before. And I started working with a Theater for Social Change troupe. And part of that work was meeting weekly, several times a week actually, to develop together, to develop new work, to just develop as people. We would play games, we would have workshops, we would do theater exercises, or sometimes we would just have discussions. And this was also a space where I got a really long-term time to start teaching young folks. I mean, younger, they weren't, you know, it's all relative, but younger folks than me. Over a long period of time, we were working on, you know, theater skills and generating our own material. With this troupe, I was teaching them because this was our pool of actors to like go out into the community and take interactive kinds of workshops and scenes to start dialogues. And you know, it was really theater with a purpose, and theater to elicit interaction with an audience and with the community, which was wonderful and really eye-opening. But then I also got to see what happened in the classroom space and in this really connective space of meeting every week with a troupe of actors. And I got really interested in the changes that are possible in that kind of laboratory space with just people who may or may not identify as actors, who can experience profound growth and discovery and worth and value in themselves and in a theatrical experience that may or may not ever add up to something like Broadway or, you know, the ways we think of professional theater. And so that sparked a real soul search in me too, because the things that I really loved about theater was usually the rehearsal room. Like, there's something wonderful about performance, but I was drawn to theater as a young person because I just loved what I could become through doing this, and not just as a character, but just me as a person. And so I kind of I thought it was a side quest, but I went to seminary, and theater was just endlessly relevant while I was studying this multi-religious course of study. And I had this theory that I wonder if an acting class could feel kind of like a church. And I started, while I was in seminary, I started teaching. I was living in Atlanta at the time. I started teaching at the Alliance Theater, and I started structuring my classes not just to make people great actors who could be in a commercial or a film or something like that, but just as a space like a yoga class or something where you come because it's healthy, not because you're necessarily trying to get to a destination, but because it's just something lovely to do in your week and it makes you feel better. And being in those classes and crafting those classes has become such a purpose-driven and honestly creative pursuit for me. So that is these days a big way that this artistic pursuit meets the world in my life. My muse, does it have to be singular? I don't know if I have just one muse. My muse is, maybe if I had to say one thing, it would be surprise. I probably already mentioned that I am fascinated by the ideas we can only have together. And sometimes even if I'm working alone, I think of myself as just a collaborator with the present moment. So it's an interesting way to be, considering that I'm in an art form that involves a lot of rehearsal and doing the same thing over and over again. But I love the aspect of it that is in pursuit of what's fresh and what's surprising, and like, oh, I didn't even know that I could do that, or that I had that idea floating around in my head. And so a lot of times the way that I find that is through embodiment. So through just being in movement, or being in conversation, or being in the present moment with whatever is here and happening now. So I'll say that for now, that my muse, my big muse is surprise. When I think about the role of art in community, it's so multifaceted. I think a lot about our need for third spaces in our community, right? So there's this idea that we have our home and we have work. Most of us have home and work, but we need a third space to be together, to just be ourselves, to be in growth and relationship. And we don't have a lot of those spaces. Sometimes a cafe can be that space for some people, maybe a bar, or maybe they've got like an activity that they do. But I think that the arts, and especially collaborative arts like theater, provide wonderful third spaces for us, especially in our society that's increasingly less organized around organized religion, which, houses of worship have, in times past, been important third spaces for communities. But there's just an increasing number of folks who are identifying as spiritual, or at least not religious, who don't have those spaces for whatever reason. And I think the arts are a wonderful connective space within and between faith paths or cultural traditions, where we can meet again and make meaning together, and just be together and solve problems and create what's coming next for us. I went to school for chaplaincy, and I went to a chaplaincy program through the Chaplaincy Institute. I got to give them a shout out because I thought they were so wonderful, and they really emphasized artistic expression as a core part of their interfaith curriculum. And so I got to learn a lot about many different ways that art and creativity are a big part of the health and healing, and that can be our physical health. As a theater artist, I also think a lot about healing our communities, especially because a lot of the theater I've been doing in the last decade or two has been about theater for change and that art form as a means and honestly kind of a technology for coming together and being in dialogue and reflecting on ourselves and trying to play with being different, being in different new ways and maybe also old ways. I also really love play as a methodology. Play is really at the heart of everything that I do, and I feel like for me it's at the heart of creativity. Maybe I should have said play was my muse. But I know play to be so healing for our minds and our bodies and our relationships. And I think that a healthy creative practice brings us back into that sense of play, whether that's just playing on our own or playing with materials or playing with an idea or playing with collaborators or playing with, forces beyond us that we can touch or experience through artistic expression. So I hear artists asking, when I'm coaching them, or I even hear myself in my own creative journeys wondering like, oh, is this worthwhile, or is this good enough, or is this worth spending my time on this? And I just want to encourage all of us to remember that yes, like this is part of what makes life worth living for us and for the people around us, and we just have no way of really knowing where our creativity comes from or where it goes, because I think that energy can be neither created nor destroyed, and if there's a creative energy flowing through us, who are we to stop that? So I just want to urge us all to keep going and take a line from Mary Oliver and remember that you do not have to be good. We just need to follow that sparkle that keeps us curious and keeps us making things and discovering things as we do. I do all kinds of different work, and I do that through or under the umbrella of my company called Well Played Creative. I co-founded that with my husband, Nasa Bass. And if you want to find me or us there, you can visit us at wellplayedcreative.com or on Instagram at wellplayedcreative, and would love to connect.